Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Anderson, and I'm the president and CEO of the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. And before we begin this evening, I would like to take a moment to recognize Virginia W. Meade, her daughters in attendance, Margaret Neely, Virginia Meade, and Caroline Handy, and the entire Meade family for their great support of the James C. Meade Lecture Series. It was Mr. Meade who founded and ran this lecture program for many years, and without he and Virginia's generous support, it would not live on today with opportunities like tonight's to hear from our country's most distinguished curators and art historians. So again, let's give them another round of applause. Thank you so much. I would also like to say a few words in anticipation of our summer exhibition, which I think anybody who is here for tonight's subject matter will be interested in. Opening June 17th on the museum's third floor, we will be hosting True Nature, Rodin in the Age of Impressionism, a new exhibition organized by the Los Angeles County Museum of Art. Featuring more than 60 works by one of the greatest, perhaps the greatest, sculptor since the Renaissance, Auguste Rodin, this exhibition brings together LACMA's incredible collection that includes key pieces from the Gates of Hell and Burghers of Calais commissions, along with his towering monument to Balzac, which I'll tell you, there's only one place on the entire third floor we can even put it because it weighs so much, which is pretty incredible. In addition to paintings by artists in Rodin's circle, including his close friend Claude Monet. I hope all of you who are here this evening will not only return to see that once-in-a-lifetime exhibition, but that you'll help us share the news about that exhibition with our community. So again, June 17th, True Nature, Rodin in the Age of Impressionism. Now on to tonight's speaker, who will be familiar to many of you. Dr. Gloria Groom is chair of Painting and Sculpture of Europe and the David and Mary Winton Green Curator at the Art Institute of Chicago. Since joining the museum in 1985, she has been involved in numerous major monographic exhibitions and their accompanying catalogs, including Cézanne in 2022, which I'm devastated that I missed. That's an exhibition that I heard incredible things about. Monet in Chicago, 2021, Manet in Modern Beauty, Gauguin, the artist as Alchemist, Van Gogh's Bedrooms, which I believe you spoke on last time you were here, Impressionism, Fashion and Modernity, and Seurat, and the Making of Le Grand Jatte. Gloria continues to oversee monographic online scholarly catalogs of the museum's Impressionist collection, involving an international team of scholars, conservators, and scientists. To date, she has written 4 and edited volumes on Cézanne, Monet, Renoir, Pissarro, Caillebotte, Gauguin, and Manet. Her contributions to French art and culture have been recognized by the French Republic, which named her Officer of the Order of Arts and Letters in 2012, and in 2016, she was further recognized by the French, receiving a medal as Chevalier or Knight in the Legion of Honor, which is an incredible accomplishment. One last note, in the 31 years that we've been doing the Friends Lecture Series, only 4 speakers have presented more than once. 3 of those 4 speakers presented twice, and only Dr. Groom has presented more than twice, and this will be her 6th time presenting to us. So that's why all of you, of course, know her. So please join me in welcoming back OKCMOA's favorite lecturer, Dr. Gloria Groom.
I just want to thank the president, the CEO, and I wanted to thank you, Brian, for inviting me into the Meade family, and especially Virginia Meade. That's how I got started coming. Is this working? It is? Okay. It sounds very, okay, Britney Spearsy. That's how I got started coming here. I love to come here. And Brian wrote me and he said, thanks for bringing Chicago, because I came in yesterday. And I said, today I thought, no, this isn't Chicago, because we'd still be in it. We'd still be having snow days, and you're now in spring already, and that would not be happening where I come from. I also want to notice that my husband is coming this year, so while I seem to come every 3 years, this is the first time that he has come, so he's going to. Yes, and usually when I come here, I'm speaking about exhibitions, either exhibitions to come or exhibitions that have happened, like Van Gogh's Bedrooms. And the last one I was here for, it is every 3 years, was Manet and Modern Beauty. But today I'd like to do something a little different. As Michael reminded us, he missed the Cézanne exhibition, which is now at the Tate Modern, and so I don't have an exhibition until 2024-25 when we're going to celebrate Gustave Caillebotte. And so I thought today it would be interesting to back up and to do a little bit about my work with these monographic catalogs that Michael told you about, that you saw in the blurb about me, and some of the revelations that have come to us through this scientific examination, through this technical examination of works of art. So I'm going to be taking 3 major artists from the Art Institute. So Caillebotte, Gustave Caillebotte, whose Paris Street Rainy Day you see here, and Claude Monet, of course, and the last will be Auguste Renoir. And I think it's going to be a kind of different talk, and we'll see if it goes. So here's people walking by this painting, which, as you know, is life-size. You've seen it. We built the wall for it. And it's a painting that attracts because it has this feeling of Paris even as it is now. And you can walk into this painting. It's almost like a cinematographic quality to it of this couple walking down the street and all of these other people, 30-something people, little people, walking around in the streets of Paris that we know still today, Haussmann's Paris. So backing up, why did we start to do these online scholarly catalogs, which is why we have this technical information I'm going to talk to you about today? We realized that the print catalog for a scholarly catalog of our collection is just, it takes so long, and once it's done, it immediately goes out of print. This is one on our Northern European painting. It took 7 years. So what we wanted to do was to actually do a kind of catalog that would be a one-stop shopping for scholars, but also anyone who's interested in the Art Institute's collections. And we started with the Impressionist collections. So we wanted the art history coming from curatorial, everything in our files, like how it got there, the receipts that were paid for it. We wanted the conservation, the records of it, and any kind of work that's been done. And so for this project, which was funded by the Getty, so the first catalogs we did were like Cadillacs. Now we're kind of in a, I don't want to say it because somebody's going to have that car and then they're going to get angry with me, but you know what I'm talking about. It's no longer the Cadillac. We're in a different mode, but we're still trying to hit all these, check all these boxes so that if you were a student, for example, and instead of having to go to the registrar's office to learn the history of it, to the conservation lab, the curatorial, you can do one-stop shopping on the web, looking interactively at our collection. And we started with 7 major Impressionist artists, 3 of which I'm going to talk about today. So giving you an idea. And what we're doing, instead of the art history, what we're really doing is we're looking beneath the surface to figure out the kind of stories that are told that can help us with the art history, but that come from material analysis, from the actual way the painting is made. So, Caillebotte. On the bottom left, you'll see the website, so you can go home and play around with these catalogs. I hope you will, anytime you want. Caillebotte, we only have 2 paintings. Of course, this is the big one, literally, and a couple of works on paper. But it was a wonderful experience to work with the scientists and the conservators. This is the way the painting looked. It's the only painting in that gallery that I know most of you know with all of the Impressionist paintings. It's the only painting, one of 2 paintings that were actually purchased rather than given to the Art Institute in the 30s by the Potter Palmers, the Ryerson, and people that really, their names resonate with our galleries. And this is a painting that came in through Wildenstein in 1960s. It was actually owned by Chrysler, and I don't know why Mr. Chrysler decided to sell it because he made a huge mistake. The Chrysler Museum would be a great place for this. Anyway, this is the way it looked. We had never touched it because we thought it was in good condition, but we realized that the varnish had kind of yellowed. And so we started doing the treatment, and there's like 1,000 of these little swabs of kind of cleaner, this kind of whatever chemical that Fay Rubel is using went into cleaning this. And that was a big discovery because you saw the difference between the yellow varnish and just the blueness of it, and how he was criticized, Caillebotte was criticized when he showed this in 1877. He was criticized as an artist who only paints in blues and violets. And you couldn't really see that because they were masked by this kind of yellowing varnish, so everything looked grayer rather than bluey and purpley. So things like that started to come out, and all of these little people that I was talking about, the man carrying the painter who's going to carry the ladder over, people that are behind the main couple. And you can see, here's a perfect example. On the left-hand side of the image, you can see the left-hand side of this woman's skirt and how it had, we call it a bloom, that the varnish had faded. The varnish had discolored it, but underneath the painting had kind of got this cloudiness. And you can see we're now taking off the varnish, so now the tear is very visible, and that will have to be retouched. But you can also see, just by saturating it with a wet cotton piece, how much different it's going to be when we finally do the next varnish once it's cleaned and treated and then needs to be revarnished into that very, very luxurious silk that this woman is wearing in her walking dress. For any of you who saw Impressionism in Fashion and Modernity, this was one of the key works in that exhibition because it represents the time when Paris really opened up for women, and women started not having the trains and the crinolines, but rather the bustle that allowed them to have the mobility to have a walking dress. And then, of course, these new boulevards that were started in the 1860s and that continued till the 1880s, they allowed women to be seen on the street, sometimes even unchaperoned. The other thing we really loved finding was that we had always thought her earring was a pearl because it looked like a pearl, and we sold earrings in the shop, Caillebotte's earrings, pearls. It is not the woman with the pearl earring. It is a woman with probably not a diamond, because diamonds in the afternoon or whenever, morning or afternoon, were just not done. That's an evening thing, so a rhinestone of some sort. But it really came out that it was quite different. And the veil she's wearing to protect herself from the city, you know, the kind of dirt and things that get struck, came out much more. And everything about her came into focus in a way that it had not before. And you can see behind, you see the woman that's opening the umbrella. There's all these little details, there's these vignettes, and everyone has the umbrella. And as you'll remember, the umbrella, which was the retractable umbrella silk, which was invented in London, of course, and it comes to Paris, and by the 1860s, it is in every department store. So they're all carrying the same umbrella. There is no, it's the great, there it is. They're all the same. There is no style problem here because there isn't another style to be had. So people of all classes are seen on this street, and people of all classes are carrying the same retractable umbrella. So what we found was that in the Paris Street Rainy Day, there was a kind of homogeneity of the sky. It was a kind of a gray, yellow-gray, but it was almost as if it just was the same sky all the way across. And we know that the critics, when they saw this painting, they were like, you know, is it raining or is it not raining? Why are they having their umbrellas up? Where's the rain? Well, in the sketch, which we went and saw the sketch at the Musée Marmottan, we could see that there were these patches of yellow in the sky. It wasn't a consistent color in the background. And so we went back to our painting, and you can see here with this UV image, this is the sketch, and this is what you can see with the visible eye today. You can see these yellow plots. Here's what's underneath ours. So instead of just one color, you can see that there was originally these yellow swabs, these kind of yellow patches. And so we took the overpaint. So somebody, probably a dealer, probably Wildenstein, you don't quote me, probably decided that this would be more saleable if it just had a continuous background. And so they painted it. They made some other changes too, which in the treatment we just simply took them away. So now we're back to the raw, the virginal, the original painting. So you can see in the pre-treatment, you're getting the yellow varnish, but you're also getting a very yellowy sky, but without any sense of changing climate. Caillebotte was an impressionist, and while he painted figures in a more photographic mode, in a more sort of more realistic, let's say, than a Monet who might want to dissolve the figure into the background, he still was very conscious of the times of the day, those temporal attributes that we associate with that kind of painting of nature as it is. So in the end, he is really more of an impressionist because he's showing us a day that is changeable, that is slightly starting to get light again, that the sun is peeking through, kind of what you had today around 1 o'clock. And also when she was making these, taking away the old varnish, taking away the overpaint, there were other discoveries to be made that I think are even more important because they actually changed the way we read this painting. And that was this. So the extensive retouching. So if you can imagine this was going to be stretched around the stretcher bars, but there was literally a whole part of canvas that had been left unresolved. And somebody had decided that they were going to paint that in. So if you can imagine that this is the way that it looked before somebody decided to redo it and to stretch it out, to make it further out, and then they added the paint to it. So Caillebotte literally thought the painting was going to stop right here. So interesting, like, why are we doing this? What is happening here? So this is the way the painting looked when we took it into the studio. This is the way the painting looks today without the overpaint that someone must have done to make that building, to make it have a little bit more, to make it bigger. Did they do it because they wanted to fit a bigger frame? Don't know. We don't know the answers to that. So, complicated line. If you follow this line, you'll see that it doesn't necessarily, it's not really a straight line, and it's not exactly the same all the way down, so it's complicated. But if you look on this side, what Caillebotte loved doing was what Degas loved doing. He loved cropping it in and making it more immediate by, that man is going to, there's going to be an accident. He's going to bop into that woman, and she's not going to be happy. There is not enough room on that sidewalk. Caillebotte is playing with that, and we actually know from the x-rays that this was a later addition, that he wanted to add more dynamism, and so he put a man in there, and this is going to be a disaster very, very soon. But you can see how he likes to crop in things. That's Caillebotte. He's thinking about, his friend Degas, but he's also thinking about photography and what framing can do to a painting and how it can make it look, more interesting. And so think about what would have happened if you had bisected this and didn't have that extra that's just painted by somebody else. Think about what would happen to that foot if you actually took that and you didn't have, so this is all just what was left. This is not, we don't think this is really meant to be seen. This is the line we think was going to go down. So this is how it looks today, because we chose to err on the side of caution, not knowing exactly what Caillebotte would have wanted. But to me, this does not look good at all. It looks like this building was bombed out rather than a building that was newly built, that had been built in his neighborhood in the time he was living right around the corner from where this painting was done. And here's my suggestion that I keep asking people to do, but I have to keep asking. So here it is. Here's the way it looks today. And if we just brought that frame in a little bit, it's just a question of remitering, right? It's going to look a lot better. But so far, no one is listening to me. So I just thought I'd bring it up. But it's such an enchanting painting either way. But once you know this is there, I think I've ruined it for you. Because now you, too, are going to see what I see every time I'm in front of this painting. So how did Caillebotte get from point A to point Z? Well, this is really interesting because he's not a really good draftsman. He's not like Degas. He's an artist, as you know, who comes late to the Impressionists, who has a very short lifetime, and Impressionism and painting and getting everybody involved was one of many. He's a stamp collector. He was an engineer of boats, not an engineer, but a designer, an inventor of really racing boats. He was a gardener. He was many, many things. And so developing his drawing style, these are some of the drawings. You can see how the one on the left is scaled. Here's more painted drawings. So he was fixated on this couple, which is indeed the subject of this painting. We don't know who they are. They're models. That's the sketch I showed you earlier. So here he is. This is his house. So this is where he lives, somewhere over here. This is where he's standing in this weird intersection that's not quite one of the stars like around the Arc de Triomphe. Here's the Gare Saint-Lazare, and here's this new Pont de l'Europe, so the Europe Bridge, which had just been built. So it's an unmarked intersection. Interesting, it was near his home. So he did this and showed this the same year of this Pont de l'Europe. So this is above, looking down on the railroad tracks. And of course, that same year, Monet painted his Gare Saint-Lazare. And interestingly enough, he and Caillebotte had spent the summer together, and Caillebotte was paying for his studio right in this area. So I think Monet was a kept man. And they talked about, let's do these paintings, of Paris streets and bridges and things, but that's just an aside. So here we are. Here's the intersection. Here's the way it looks today. I'm sure you've gone there. I'm sure every one of you wants to go and hold up an umbrella because we have photos in our files of lots of people doing the same. But the road really does tilt up, and it is difficult to, it's a one-way. Of course, it's not cobblestones anymore, but it is difficult to get the full perspective. But you can see the flat facades of these short blocks, and it hasn't changed that much. We own, as of 2011, this drawing where he's actually indicating how this umbrella is going to be. These are the people, these little streets, and it's about this big, the drawing. And so we decided we wanted to see what is the relationship of this very schematic drawing to the painting. So we looked at it, and what did we find? We found that this is where I kind of nerd out because I'm with these scientists, and we're like, oh, I can't believe it. But there's these little tiny indentations right in the that make the access. And then there are these little kind of punch holes that you can see it in these close-up where he's actually thinking about how this vanishing point perspective is going to work, but it's a splayed perspective. It's not complete. He, as I said, was an inventor. He had these tools. He was thinking about boats and how he's going to make a boat faster. So he had these kind of tools in his studio. And here you see all of the little points that he made so that he could make these intersecting lines in this very simplistic drawing. And this is just showing you connecting the dots. So he was thinking about this kind of rushing, this kind of telescopic perspective was there from the beginning when he's thinking about the background, the people and the background. He's going to populate the stage. So we went to, this is Pablo and the paper conservator were looking, and then we realized that he probably used some kind of a copying device, like a camera lucida, where we used to see them advertised in the back of comic books, where you look down and you're seeing the kind of shadow image, this sort of image of what you're looking at, but you're never looking at the image, you're looking down at your paper and you're sketching it. So Pablo teaches at the School of the Art Institute, and he teaches a class in how older instruments can be used today by artists to get the best effect. So we sent him to Paris. He was like, I can't figure this out. I'm like, yes, you can. You're going. So he was excited. And there he is, setting up his camera lucida and he stayed 2 days because he had to wait. And this is just showing you how it is. That this sketch, we're going to go back because it happened so quickly. I'm doing it again. This sketch, this is the kind of way it fits from that drawing, which is so small, but how he could use that and then scale it up to the size it is today. I love that person running across. And then back.
So what we have here is the finished canvas in which the drawing has been transferred onto the canvas by a factor of 7. So the reproduction that we're using of the drawing at 1:1 was the template to make that enlargement onto the canvas to represent the final canvas that you see in the Art Institute. After taking that drawing, he probably went to the studio and used straight edges and rulers to correct some of the geometry and conform the drawing for the perspective and the overall geometry of the scene before making the transfer to the large canvas. It was only a matter of using very simple tools like calipers and rulers to take some spot measurements on the drawing, multiply that by 7, and then translate that exact dimension onto the canvas. Since I have the tacks marking out the vanishing point on the horizon which I've established, I also have the verticals of the part of the building that faces you, and I've also marked off the vertical of the end of the building. So now all that matters is I take the ruler, bump it up against the tack, slide it up to the point where it connects with the front of the building, and all I need to do is stop the line at the rear face of the building to create the parallel. In the end, this canvas, which is at 1:1 scale of the full painting, should line up with the painting that we see in the same way that at 1/7 that scale, this drawing matches the canvas, and going back even one more step, this drawing matches perfectly with the optics of looking through the camera lucida standing on the street on Rue de Turin.
Isn't that incredible? Woohoo! Yeah, we were excited. We were excited. Yeah. So, yeah. So when you look at this painting, you'll see that bad edge that I'm not going to talk about, but you'll also think about how Caillebotte worked, how this simple instrument that's been around since the 18th century or early 19th century could be used by an artist and to create something. So getting from A to Z was really quite simple, as Pablo has told us. So my next, I will have to speed this up, but the Caillebotte was my exciting thing, because we're going to do this Caillebotte exhibition with the Orsay in 2024-25, so I'm sort of back into it. But this is again, the website. You can go to the Monet, and just a couple of quick overview things. So this is, we showed a lot of these discoveries in the Monet in Chicago, and the striated, the lines that you see are the times we opened and closed during COVID. So luckily it was Monet in Chicago and nothing was coming from Paris. It was all like down the street, and they're like, yeah, you can have the painting for 2 years. We're not going anywhere. But anyway, this is a painting that we've always loved, early Monet, 1867, so before the Impressionists are starting to get together in the 70s and showing together. And it's, showing his place, where he's from, Le Havre, this fishing village, where he really understood boats and water, which makes him such a great artist, but it's also where he would retreat in the summers. He'd go to Paris, and he goes to Paris in 1868, where he's really going to establish himself there, but he comes home during the summers. And we've always thought it was a pendant, kind of the opposite to the one at the Met, which is the same scale and which shows touristy people, like the change in this fishing village to the tourist site it was becoming. And now I'm going to be showing what you can do at home. This is just to show you the different lights we looked under. So UV, ultraviolet, transmitted light. And what we saw when you start looking at it through these different technical tools, do you see these people on the side with the top hats? So these are this is the trace of them. They're no longer there, but they're traced on. And we found out that the beach was painted on before there was no boat. There were no fishermen, that they were added over the paint. And when you know that, you can see that the beach runs through them. You can see the strokes underneath them, that they were on top of the ground rather than left in negative space to put the figures. So this gave us so much information. Oh, I guess it stopped. Okay. And so here's just showing you what we found. And so instead of being a pendant, like here's the labor and here's the leisure, he really started this out to be very similar to the painting at the Met. And it's only in the working. And it also shows you a little bit about Monet's working methods, that he could change his mind. And by changing his mind and by knowing what's underneath the surface, we have a whole new reading of what Monet was thinking about at that time. So it's just another layer. You can see the differences. So that's something to play with. This one is quite different because this is a painting that we know has been mucky-mucked somehow. It's 1868. It's the only painting surviving from that summer when he was really, really dirt poor, and his future wife, Camille, had just had a baby, a 9-month-old now, and they're on the Seine. They're staying at the hotel across the way, the Auberge, which Zola, their friend, told them to stay at, and they don't have enough money. And he ends up leaving everything there because he can't pay for their stay. And there's a fire, and there's a flood. I mean, not a fire, a flood. It's got to be one or the other. And they're just the paintings are destroyed. This one survived. It's a large painting at the Art Institute. It gets asked for all the time because it's so abstract. But we've known from the beginning, even looking at without the X-ray, but certainly looking at the X-ray, that there's something else going on. You know, kind of a big head for a baby, but there's something else. There it is. This is a tear. Don't look at that. That's just somebody poked a pencil through, which is so sad, but it happens. But you can see a face, and you can see more body, and you can see how she was painted over the grass. So were there two people? What is this, for example? What the heck? Is that a dog? You know, what's that thing here? And so we've looked, and we looked under the X-ray, we looked with UV, and we realized that there's nothing else to be pulled. Unlike the other painting from 1867, where the traces, you could pull them from the canvas, especially with transmitted light. This is what you see is what you get. Another fascinating for me, because this is a painting that's much later. This is decades after. So by 1890-91, he has been discovered by Mrs. Potter Palmer, by the Havemeyers. I mean, Monet has come to America, much to his dismay. He never came. But his dealer, Durand-Ruel, had established a gallery in New York, and the Americans are what, as you know, the story of Impressionism is America. And so, you know, at one point, Monet was so upset, he's like, you're sending everything I own to America, there won't be anything for the French. And it's kind of like, well, they're not buying you, honey. You know, you can't have it both ways. You want to keep painting? Let me take you to New York. Anyway, so this was one of many paintings that were sold at the New York Gallery to Chicagoans, Potter Palmer, Kimball, Ryerson. And it's a painting we love because it's right when he's renting and then buying the property at Giverny, which we still visit today. So he's got money now. I mean, he's a man of property. He's got a dealer. He's making plenty of money. That's what makes this question, this little revelation, I think, so fascinating. So first, we found that there were there's like some kind of a matter, you know, something like a piece of grass got stuck in the wet paint. Well, we know the Impressionists painted out of doors, but we never have the proof. And it's like, yeah, there it is, the proof, you know, it's there. So that, we were ecstatic. And we went through all of the 33 Monets looking for other kinds of proof, like fossils or something, and couldn't find it. So, but that was it. Then, underneath, when we were doing, this is the transmitted light, which is a very special, a very scientific way of saying you take the painting. Most of our paintings, in fact, all of our Monets have been relined, so it's really hard, but you just blast the back with light so that you can see, hopefully, what's on the back of the canvas. And sometimes, even with another canvas, a relined painting, as ours are, you can see some things that are really interesting, and that's the case of here, where we were able to see clearly the tracing of another composition that he had started, and for whatever reason, at this time, when he could have just thrown a canvas away because he had money, he decided to paint over it. And so what was this other composition? So here it is with the transmitted IR, dominant features, underlying composition. This is what we're doing because it's really hard to read these unless you have these outlines. And here are some suggestions. So he does the poppy field in 90-91. He does these earlier, 82, 85, this is what he's actually painting, just to show you that Monet never completely invents. He's always basing himself in nature. But it's tempting. We don't know for sure, but it's tempting, and it also makes you have another piece of the Monet puzzle, was that even after he was famous, he was still thinking and still struggling and still reusing paintings rather than just throwing them away or finishing them or whatever or selling them as sketches. He was actually going to overpaint them. And that seems like a small thing, but in the Monet literature, you always hear that by this time, he's not worried about canvases because he's got a dealer who's paying for his canvases and his paints and prodding him to get things out because he's got plenty of clients, especially in Chicago, ready to buy him. So as you know, the Orsay has the corner on the cathedral, the Rouen Cathedral. They have 5. We have 6 stacks of wheat. Just talking. It's also his first series, the first of the many series that follow of the Thames series and eventually the Water Lily series in the last 26 years of his life. We have the first, most of which are thanks to the Potter-Palmer family, who ended up, she bought from the exhibition in 1891 where he showed for the first time 15 of these in 2 rooms. This is the first time it had been done that you show only one subject in an exhibition. She bought 9 from that, which would be tantamount to buying really, really contemporary art today. She sold many of them during her lifetime. We ended up with 2, but then the family bought us another one. So 3 of them came from the Potter-Palmer collection. Here they are today. And we have always thought that he just kind of moved on. Like he was there, it was kind of maybe the changing seasons, and he brings out another canvas, and eventually he has his series. There are 27 total. We have 6. But again, looking underneath the surface, looking for what is the reality, what's the physical story that these paintings have to tell that have been masked by the final product. Well, first let me tell you, these weren't little muffin-like things. These are 16 to 18 feet tall stacks of grain that are used for the animals. So they're almost like houses on the horizon. You can see at Giverny, this is in his front yard, how they were right there. He didn't have to go look for these and how big they are and how the tall ladders to get up to them. But given that, you can also see the red lines show where he started, how many changes. So while he's working on these all together, so he brings them back in the studio, he adjusts them according to how they look together because he thinks of them as an ensemble, which is a better way of saying series. Because series, you can think of the Gare Saint-Lazare, there's 7 of them, but they're not like these. These are actually harmonized one to another, not only in the way they look together, but the seasons that he's represented, and I'll show you in a second how that works. So you're seeing the changes he's made that we were able to detect just from those simple, not so simple, but those tools we use to go beneath the surface. And here's a seemingly very straightforward snow scene of one of these stacks with the houses behind it and the mountains and the Giverny north of Paris, about an hour. But look, he started out with 2. You know, he saw 2, but he ended up with 1. So he saw 2, but for whatever reason, in harmonizing this ensemble, he decided that wasn't working. So again, thinking of the puzzles that artists have to, we see the finished result. We don't see their rough draft. You know, it's like if you look at Proust, it reads so beautifully, and then you see a manuscript page and like, doesn't work. And then there was one more exciting thing. So there are some losses, like just little losses in the painting in 2 areas. But underneath is green paint. So now we know he started this painting probably in the springtime or summer maybe, but definitely in spring, and that he changed it to a snow scene, again, to fit the idea of the whole series, to work with the series, not just, so it's temporal because it does have a specific time of the year, but it's also temporal, mediated by the needs of art as fiction, art as artifice, art that the artist makes. Now, my husband Joe is an artist, and he thinks that maybe we shouldn't be looking beneath the surface because, maybe the artist didn't want you to see that, but you know what? We can do it, and it's fun, and it's really interesting, so we're doing it. This shows you the green. So this is, one of those slice, just a teeny tiny slice, you can tell it's 50, showing you the green that's underneath. So definitely green, not white. Now, I'm going to, in the next, perfect. The next 8 or so minutes, I'm going to talk about our last investigation, this time to Monsieur Renoir, who of all the painters seems the most straightforward, and what you see is what you get because he's just a delicious painter and you just, Renoir, as you know, was the least wealthy of all the Impressionists. And I say that because it's interesting when you're talking about art history to know their economic status because sometimes that drives their art. So you have Caillebotte, who never sells and who gives his collection of other artists, Degas, Sisley, Pissarro, to the French state, which is why we have the Musée d'Orsay today. 1894, he gives his collection. They take half of them. The others are scattered around. Then you have Monet, who is, trying to make money. And then you have Renoir, who has to make money because he's the son of a tailor and a seamstress, and he is working class in a way that the other artists are not. Monet comes from a very wealthy family. It's just that he made the mistake of living in sin and his dad cut him off. But apart from that, he would have been fine. So we're going to look at this painting as our final example. Madame Léon Clapisson. You see her, she's 33 years old. She's a very much a society woman. This painting to us has always seemed just kind of straightforward. It's a portrait. Renoir, by this time, was starting his career as a portrait artist. He didn't start out that, but you'll see that he gains the trust of the wealthier people. So there she is with her husband, Léon. He's a successful businessman. Between 1881 and 1885, he buys lots and lots of Impressionism, like Degas. I mean, he just seems like he's getting it. He knows modern art, and he's buying from Durand-Ruel, and he amasses 70, 80 paintings. This is what makes Renoir's career as a portraitist. So he exhibits this in the Salon of 1878, and it gets exhibited 3 times after that to the point where he's like, can you please stop doing this? But Madame Charpentier, that wonderful painting in the Met, is so beautiful. And you can imagine that this young woman, Valentine Clapisson, wanted something like this for herself, something that really shows her ease and her beauty. So this is their collection. I'm just briefly going through it. This is what they owned our painting. The Clapissons owned at the time they asked Renoir. This is the important one. They owned this Manet painting, which is exquisite, of this garden, very impressionist, very loose, very abstract in many ways. So Renoir was probably thinking, oh, I can do something rather loose and different too, because they get it. They get Impressionism. So he does this, thinking, oh yeah, and she rejects it. She rejects it straight out. This is the letter that he wrote to his friend, Béraud, saying, it is terrible. I have to start all over. After so many sittings, she rejected it. It's just horrible. And he's angry because he spent a lot of time going to Neuilly, where they live, coming back and forth and getting the time right and making sure the sun's right, because he's trying to paint a true Impressionist painting where the sun dapples and she's sort of dissolved into the sunlight. And it's been rejected. See, he was thinking, look, she liked this. I did something like this. I can paint this. These were all paintings he was doing at the same time, and I think he misunderstood her ability to understand Impressionist paintings, but when it comes to her portrait, excuse me, none of that dappling stuff. I want to look good. So that one had to go away, and fortunately, it went on to live another life in other collections. It was shown in Paris in 1883. It was a big hit. Other people liked it, and it became, it wasn't abandoned. It wasn't torn up or anything. So here's Madame Clapisson, very straightforward, wearing a ball gown with this kind of feathery, with her little chartreuse gloves and her little poof fascinator, or whatever they were called at the time, in her hair, and this background that looks very Renoir-esque. That's sort of where you add a lot of liquid with your pigments and you get this kind of tie-dyed, iridescent background. So we decided, let's look beneath the surface on this one. And what did we find? But that it originally, because you can see around the tacking margins, it was a red background, not this bluey Renoir blue that we consider. So we decided to look closer, and we did an exhibition on it. And this is the varmint. This is the insect that was used to make that red. And it's gross. If you read it, look, candies, ice cream, lipstick is made with these insects from South America. Pulverized female insects. So we did a little exhibition on it because we wanted to show how this fades, how this pigment is not at all, it's not permanent. It's what we call fugitive, and it can change colors when it's exposed to light. It doesn't keep the same color. So we did this little experiment with it, and what we did was we put the original without its frame, so you could see the red around the edges, and then we made a photo composite of the way we think it would have looked at the time she finally accepted it. So here we did a little thing in the galleries. That's what you'll see if you go online and look at our catalog, our scholarly catalog. And again, so which do you like best? I don't like this at all. She may have liked it. She may have wanted that sort of like red, 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 but I think that if you're thinking about a harmonious painting, this has a much more, it seems to hang together a lot better. So we're kind of happy it faded, but it did fade. And these are the kind of things that give you insights to an artist, what they're thinking, what their methodology is, and also, of course, with a portrait, which is why Degas never did portraits, what the client wanted. So back to Caillebotte, the final one. We just think that these paintings have so much more to say to us. It's wonderful to see them as they are today, but knowing how they got to be is also pretty exciting. And as I said, we're doing this exhibition. So last Friday, which was, 6 days ago, I had this international group in to brainstorm for our Caillebotte exhibition. It's actually going to be about Caillebotte painting men. So get excited. And I explained all of these ways that this painting has been changed, but also that problem of the frame, and tried to get them to see it my way. And I'm still working on it, but some of them have come around and they're like, you need to reframe it. So it wasn't only because of that, but kind of. Thank you. We took the painting down because of those crazy people that are throwing things at paintings lately. We decided that we had to put plexi on it, acrylic glass, and fortunately we took it down to be measured, and fortunately there isn't an acrylic glass big enough. So I don't think we're going to put it, I hope not, because it would just kill all the nuances that I've showed you in this lecture, and even that edge would look worse than ever. So we'll see. That story's still to be told. Thank you very much. Okay, I was told I have to quit right now, which I did. So, I'm not going to put that there. I would love to hear your comments or questions. We have some time. Anyone, you want to stop for a second, just saturate? It's a big painting. It is glorious to see it when it's not high up, and you really do walk into it. I mean, these are my favorite moments at the museum where it's just naked. It's like, hi. So I hope we don't have to glaze it, as they say. Yes?
Just curious how long a restoration for such a large painting would take.
Well, the restoration wasn't that much because it was just devarnishing, however long it takes to do 1,000 Q-tips. But the then taking off, I mean, it's really finding the right solvent that's going to carefully take the varnish and not the pigment, and then trying to test the pigments to determine what is original and what has been added, what's not the artist. And so in this case, if you consider it taking it down, we can't have this down too much. People get crazy. So I think it took 4 months. It could have taken longer, but we really accelerated it for that reason. Yes?
Really just a comment, of course. My money's on you for the win that you get your wish on this painting, because you convinced everyone in here, I would say. And thank you for loving Oklahoma so much, and the OKC MOA for coming back so many times.
Oh, you love it. I do love it. Yeah. The art and the people. Yes?
Back to the cochineal pigments.
Yes.
The bond, whoever she's on, also red. So do you believe that he knew that it would change colors over time and intentionally use a different red? Or
I don't know, because it's been a long 1883. We don't know when it was changed by the time it came to the Art Institute, because we have photos. So 1933. I don't know. When I love that idea. I'm going to add that to my talk. Yeah, and he did that because he just thought, if she lives long enough. Yeah, that's a great ending. I don't know. Like Seurat, when he painted the Grand Jade, he used a fugitive yellow that actually lost and faded during his lifetime. Like 3 years later, people were commenting on this is no longer as it no longer looks good. It's kind of... So I actually don't know. There were definitely new colors coming out that hadn't been tested, like this yellow that has never been used since because it's not a good color. But cochineal, that's a color that's still used. Does your lipstick fade? Don't know. But anyway, just the idea that you're putting pulverized insects on your... Gross. Anyway, yeah, I don't know, but I love that. Thank you. That's definitely entering into my repertoire of stories. Yeah. Yes?
When the old varnish is removed, is there concern about oxidation of pigment, or do you put another varnish of some sort on top of it?
That's a very good question. We know the Impressionists certainly by the 80s, and they did not want their works to be varnished. I mean, Renoir did because he's a sellout, but the other artists really liked that kind of a matte surface. They liked that. So what we did with the Caillebotte, we did revarnish it, but using the thinnest, and it's a natural, but it's so light that you hardly notice it. But we did do that. With Monet's, what we did was we call it spot varnishing. So rather than having it so matte that you lose some of the luminosity, really, we varnished certain areas of it. And the conservators and the curators, we worked together on that. We looked at some that had not been varnished, and we kind of decided what to do on those. So it's a combination. Yeah, all our works were heavily varnished in the 60s with a very synthetic, kind of like a laminated kind of varnish, because that was cool. That was a trend, and it will probably change our minds 30 years from now. But so we have de-varnished all of our Impressionist paintings and thought about another way of protecting them. Yeah?
Quick question. Because you spend so much time studying this particular work of art, have you ever felt the need to go to that place?
Yeah, I've been. Yeah, I've been. It's hard, though, right, Joe? We've been there, yeah. I don't think we held up the umbrella, but we have been there. It is hard, and it's so unchanged. That pharmacy, you can't see it, but that Flatiron building, the letters spell out pharmacie here. That's still there. That's what's so cool about Paris, the Paris that was built after after the Franco-Prussian War. That was, those same 6-story buildings. It's very modern. It's a very modern Paris that we're seeing here.
And follow-up question. So when you were there, what did it make you feel like you wanted to do next? Because you knew this so well.
It's so changed in the sense there's people and there's cars. You can't get that cars. I mean, what's interesting is that this cart has no horse, has nothing. So even if we did the line that should be done, there's still not. I mean, he still left it. It wouldn't make sense with or without. Yeah, no, it's there's too many people. You'd have to go at like 4 a.m. Yes?
Is there anyone impressionist that did portraits of people like Titian, where they painted them the way they wanted to be seen, not necessarily the way they are or were?
I have a feeling, Madame Clapisson, after having spent all that time making a painting, I think he just said, "What do you want? I'll do it."
Titian did that with a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, portrait artists tend to flatter. I mean, that's what they're.
Wondering if there was any one impressionist that was kind of like Titian.
Renoir is the closest thing you're going to get to a portrait artist who pleases the client. Yeah, and most of the impressionists, if you think about it, they, Manet really didn't like doing portraits too much, and yeah, it's an interesting. I hadn't thought about that as an analogy. Anyone else with a comment or? Okay, how many of you vote to frame it in? Can you take a picture of that? Is this being filmed? Because I'm definitely using this as, thank you. That's good. It's all worthwhile. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you again for coming. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces. I'll be back.